Greetings! This is Bradford Donald Keller Townsend, and this is a Forward Research Report, Wednesday, Thursday, November 7th, 2018, of the Common Era, as we ride on the rock planet spaceship Earth at over 490,000 miles per hour around the Great Attractor in the center of the Milky Way galaxy. This video is on dialectical reasoning and comparative religion. Dialectical reasoning is the process of arriving at the truth through a process of comparing and contrasting various solutions. This process, also known as logic, originated in classical Greece by the philosopher Aristotle and has evolved into the present through the works of other philosophers such as Georg Hegel. So that's what dialectical reasoning is. It's holding multiple arguments, notions in your head at one time and trying to select or synthesize, combining. Synergy is a Hermetic term. Hermes was the god of messengers, of science, of reason, of thieves, of telling lies. So he's a very interesting god. The Loki in Norse mythology, and Thoth in Egyptian mythology, and Mercury, another Mediterranean pagan. They are distinct gods. They share some common attributes, such as Thoth is the god of math and science for the Egyptians, but doesn't have some of the properties that the Greeks and Romans. And Mercury and Hermes are not identical either, although they have similar core traits. Loki has some traits, the trickster aspect with Hermes, without having, in a way, Loki is a teacher in his practical jokes and shape-shifting and such, teaches wisdom, but not in the same way that Thoth or Hermes does, who literally composed books or stone tablets with knowledge and are associated with writing. So Loki doesn't have those properties. I'm going to give some definitions. That's what Aristotle, and logic is where you have one thing following another based on there's some kind of reasonable connection, even if it's just a linguistic one where you have set a definition. So, Aristotle would look at birds and, let's say, what we would call ducks. There may be many different types of ducks and geese, and then what's the difference between a geese and a duck? Well, that's categorizing and using terms. So we're going to talk about comparative religion, and I'm going to do it from an intellectual standpoint rather than a theological, spiritual view. Henotheism comes from German intellectual in the 1800s milieu of multiple intellectuals. You can maybe point to Max Muller, but in general, instead of picking a certain personality, just use the term henotheism, which is the belief in the supremacy of one God without denying the existence of others. Then there's another term that came from Western European thought in the 1800s called Molantry, Monolatry, belief in many gods, but with consistent worship of only one deity. Monotheism, belief in the existence of only one God that created the world, is all-powerful and intervenes in the world. Another term, ethical monotheism. God is the source for one standard of morality who guides humanity through ethical principles. Other gods are variously considered to be false or demonic, and it is believed that any other gods cannot be compared to one true God. I was taught by my grandmother, who went to the top finishing school in Philadelphia, that not to talk about politics and religion. The way to make friends was to give people sincere compliments and talk about non-controversial subjects such as geography. An example of that would be talk about the Outer Banks Islands of North Carolina if you're on vacation, or on the East Coast there in that region, or the islands off of South Florida or Southwest Florida, the Florida Keys. That you could talk about geography, make some interesting conversation about the reefs or the tides there, the currents there. You could talk about the weather, the jet stream, what forecasts are for the winter summer rains or the winter snows. That you don't usually upset people talking about geography and weather. So she would engage me in conversation so that I could win friends, win friends and influence people. It's Illuminati training and how to hypnotize people while having these conversations, to put them kind of like a Jedi in the Star Wars movie. There's one scene in one of the movies, or two of the movies, where they are able to get the stormtroopers to, or Imperial troops, to follow their orders just by like hypnotizing and wave their hand type thing. So I would say that major religions, Hinduism and Shintoism in Asia. Shinto, if you don't know, is the Japanese national religion that has many gods. It's polytheistic. And why the Japanese are passionate about their religion, they deny it. Let's say that I'm a software engineer, amongst other things. If I'm in a software engineering class and I have studied and had Japanese students in my classes that I took with and had conversations with them, they might deny their Shinto, but then when they go home, you'll find that they maybe do go to the shrines and perform rituals there. They just deny it to outsiders or even to other Japanese. But if you go to the shrines there, they're swamped with people, and there's long lines for many of the shrines. And the people, you can tell by their body language, are really emotional about visiting the shrines. So Shintoism is real, and there's over 100 million people in Japan. So it is a bigger. There's more Shintoists than there are Jews in the world by 5-6 times at least. And then you have Hinduism, which is over 1 billion probably around the world that adhere to Hinduism or are very favorable to it. There's a lot of people around the world who quietly really admire Hinduism and study it. And then you have what I would not call Christianity henotheism or melanthropy or monotheism. I would just call it straight up paganism. You have three gods in one in the Trinity. You have a figure, Satan, in the book of Job. You have demons that get into the pigs, and the pigs jump in the Gospels, jump in to a body of water. It's either the Mediterranean or a lake, Galilee, or River Jordan, which is no longer there. Agricultural use of the water has used up the Jordan River, so it no longer flows. But um, there is multiple supernatural entities, and there's a hierarchy of angels in Judaism. Um, so there's over a dozen different kinds and categories of angels, and Christianity in recognizes this hierarchy of angels as well. So if you have um, thousands, millions of supernatural entities, you have a God that has three parts, um, and you have what are in Roman Catholicism and Orthodox Christianity, which is probably 80% of Christians. Um, they have the communion of saints, which means anyone who has been a Christian and died in the state of grace is a term, or dies righteousness to the point that they get to go to heaven. They do not, they go to heaven. So their astral bodies are in another dimension or in somewhere, and you can pray. Let's say there's Saint Germain or Saint Cyril. Uh, you can randomly pick uh, someone that was actual human being, Saint Brigitte, and she can then go over to Jesus and go, Jesus, will you? This person has prayed for me to help them. Now, will you, Jesus, go to the Father? You see, so if they have a communion of saints, which hopefully, according to their religion, has millions of or even billion plus people up there, plus millions of angels, plus probably millions of demons. Um, that to me is not monotheism when you have millions of characters out there running around. Islam, you have a dwarf, deformed, angry man named Muhammad who went into a cave and with no other witnesses was spoken to by an angel, Gabriel. This man was this illiterate, deformed dwarf, ugly man, went and supposedly dictated what he heard in the cave. Most of your Muslim flags show the moon Luna symbol for the female goddess of fertility, which is usually, seems like all religions associate the moon with fertility. Maybe it's because the women, human apes, um, have a monthly cycle of, when they bleed and when they become fertile. That is probably how the analog between fertility of the moon and females, and then the sun. So Allah is the god of the air, which in most religions in the Mediterranean Fertile Crescent area was the air, thunder, sky god, and then Luna. And then they go to Mecca and go around a big black cube, which has always been the symbol for Saturn. And Saturn is considered the home of the gods. It's a very beautiful planet with its rings. And there's a meteor there at the Kaaba that was worshipped prior to Islam, a fallen rock from outer space. So they were, and the Muslims believe in jinn, which there are millions of probably, and spirits, and an evil entity that, like a Satan. Satan in Judaism is not an evil entity. It's the prosecutor and a good figure, and that Satan punishes the wicked. Um, but Satan does not lure you into any type of bad behavior. You have free will as a human, and you have chosen to behave badly, and then you're punished by Satan in Judaism. Judaism is a tiny religion with 2/100ths of 1% of the world's population. That's right, only 2/100ths of 1%. not 0.2%. So it's extremely, there are only 14 million people in the world that claim to be Jewish, and of those, half to three-quarters are not religious and are more secular atheist in their outlook. So it's the actual believers in Judaism is very small. The reason I mentioned Judaism is that Christianity and Islam, which are billion plus people religions, use kind of as their substructure foundation Judaism and some of its concepts. So all the major religions, if you look at Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, they are based on astrology, astro religion. You have the solstices and the equinoxes when the days are equal, 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of night, in what we would call central Eurasia there, in what is today Iraq and Israel. They are in the northern hemisphere, and there are days of the year where the days are equal, 12 hours of day and 12 hours of night. Those are your equinoxes. So, and the holidays and their high holy days, whatever you want to call it, of Christianity, Islam, revolve or are around the celestial events. What's going on with the moon, what's going on with the stars, how long the days are. And we know that now there are new scientific knowledge that the stars and the planets, there's interplanetary magnetic fields and flux transfer events. The interplanetary magnetic field takes energy. It goes from the sun, and there are a constant stream of matter, not just electromagnetic radiation, not just ultraviolet light, not radio signals, actual material, helium atoms, iron atoms are always streaming out of the sun in all directions from the sphere. And that works as a wire conductor would to your computer or to your light lamp. There's so much of it streaming. Outer space is not empty; it's full of all. There's no square meter of outer space that doesn't have matter in it, and the densities can be 10,000 times more dense in one square meter of space than another. There are huge dust clouds that span for millions of cubic square kilometers that can be observed with relatively low-price telescopes from the the deck of your home or the roof or out the window of your apartment. So there's a lot out there in space. The stars and many other astrological bodies are. So the planets are connected by the equivalent analog of, as copper and iron and other conductors conduct electricity and magnetism connecting all the planets, which gives astrology more power. You don't want organizations such as NASA don't want to put out that there is the interplanetary conductivity of electromagnetic and other forces, and that outer space is full of stuff that can conduct electricity. So the ancients were very intelligent people. Civilization is thousands of years old. I do not really know. I would be interested in your comments about why these polytheistic religions insist on being monotheistic when they have angels, demons, and all types of other there's giants in the Old Testament that mated with humans, creating hybrids that had to be wiped out by the flood and so forth. So I'd be interested in what your hypotheses are, plural, on why polytheistic pagan religions that are based upon um, astrology deny it when it is right out there. um, that's all I have. Um, I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe and hit that bell. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.